Wait a minute.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Teague from A Teague of Your Own, and my good friend Betty Novak is here. Say hi to everybody, Betty.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here and working with Michelle again.
We're going to be talking a little bit more about all the generations that are in the workplace. We've touched about on this a little bit over the past few months, and I know we were just talking last month about how you've got more of the baby boomers unretiring and returning back into the workplace. So we thought we would visit this idea of having five generations in the workplace. So
And we talked, if I can say something, we talked about them also, the generations below them,
yeah,
not being happy about this. The owners, the CEOs may say, "Oh, thank you, because we need some more wisdom in here to fill the spaces that we need." And the other generations were thinking, "Well, where's my promotion? I thought I was going to get up
exactly.
there." So there's some sort of negativity could be going on in the workplace. So
Yeah, yeah. And so Betty, why don't you tell us a little bit about uh, these different generations and who's in them, what's going on, what some of the challenges are.
I know you see in the paper or you hear on the news the saying, "I think it's a generational thing." And maybe it is, but it is what it is, and we have to figure out how to make it work. So, and you can hear it a lot, and I heard it throughout my own career, and luckily I wasn't in work at a workplace when I went into my 60s. They would have definitely said that about me, probably, but it has been happening more and more lately that people say, "Hey, that generation just doesn't, why should they be here? They're just mucking things up." So the generations that are the owners and the CEOs are having to deal with is the Generation Z. They're born between 2001 and 2020. The next one is the millennials. They were born through 1981 to 2000, just before 9/11.
Mhm.
Generation X was born in 1965 and through 1980. And the baby boomers were born 1946 to 1964. So that's me. And the silent generation, they are thinning out
Yes.
because they were here during World War II and on, and they were born in 1925 and in 1945, because my father-in-law died a couple of years ago, and he was part of that generation and had a lot of wisdom.
Yes. Yes, they do.
So unfortunately, their office interactions are often negative or thought of as negative. Boomers are resistant to change. Well, I've seen some of my colleagues be resistant to change. Generation Z is glued to their phones. A couple of my clients have said, "I don't know what to do with them." They've done their work, but then they're looking at their phone and shouldn't they think of something else to do? So, but experts say that they don't have to be. So we need a healthy workplace that works together.
Yeah, we
And
do. Uh,
so
and
go
I
ahead.
think it's interesting because you're right. You've got these stereotypes out there about these different generations. And like you said, the one stereotype about boomers is that they're very resistant to change. The reality is most people are resistant to change. It doesn't matter what generation
Right.
you're from. And when it comes to, people being glued to their phones, well, if you're finished with your work and nobody gives you more stuff to do, uh, okay, that's what's going to happen. So with all these different people at different life stages making changes, it's not easy, especially for the workplace and especially for business owners and managers and leaders there in the workplace. I think it's interesting that LinkedIn did a survey and they found that 72% of Gen Zers
Hmm.
and 66% of millennials are contemplating a career change over the next 12 months. Uh, there was a survey by EY that found that almost a third of Generation X, and that's me, who intend to quit their job, say that hybrid or work from home options would change their mind. So if there was some type of change there in the workplace to give them some flexibility, they'd stay. Uh, Employers are having a hard time juggling all of these different generations and all of the different challenges that are coming up from them. So it's kind of hard to get a harmonious workplace and to have this harmonious culture in place with these different generations there. We're seeing a lot of younger workers who want to be digital nomads, or they want to uh, do a mid-career change. Sometimes you're finding that people are going back to school and they're learning new skills. You've got parents who, and you saw this during the COVID outbreak, you saw parents who were having to take a break because they had to stay home with their kids for school. And you've got people of all different generations that have care responsibilities. I know for my generation, with Generation X, we've got adult parents that we have to take care of. And we have either our own children or older ones have grandchildren that they're taking care of. So you've got these generations that are being sandwiched in between, taking care of family members. Uh, you've got people who are coming out of retirement, and we've been talking about that for the past couple of calls about how people are unretiring and going back into the workplace. So what's happening is you've got workplaces that are a combination of people in all stages needing to partner and support each other and collaborate with whoever is there. And that includes different ages. So what's going on when it comes to being able to identify some of these people?
Yeah. Well, the generation is one. The generation is multiple layers, as we said. It's not just one layer.
Right.
So you have to beware of saying generation, as it's a catch-all phrase, and really it doesn't help people think better of anybody. So, one of the examples is like, if you're a Gen X manager, you might want to pause and really deliberate before you green light a new strategy, because they are slow and resistant to change. Some of the generations, but the Gen X is slow. But because they laid off 50 employees, for example, in their last startup, they don't want to go through that again.
No.
So a millennial worker might have his phone off on weekends because his partner works in another state. So, and it might be that the kids go to bed at 7 o'clock and their family time is sacred on Sunday. So people are not working 24/7, 7 days a week anymore, because I think the pandemic helped them think that they need a balanced life. And that's what the Gen Xers are doing, since they're the next generation. They're making it so, where the baby boomers like me, we overworked ourselves and we were on go the whole time. So people say things like, well, I am an older millennial, or I'm a younger baby boomer. And that's because age and generation can show up very differently in the way you view things in your experience. And that's true. I mean, I think of myself as a young baby boomer because I'm open to other ideas. And I know Michelle thinks it's the same thing. And, that's why we can work together. Yeah. So you need to think about gender, race, ethnicity. Sorry, I can never say that word. Socioeconomic status. That's a tongue tizer. Culture, and where you are in the world. Those are important in the equation.
Yeah, you're right. And along those same lines, you have to dig deeper. to understand what motivates your coworkers and your colleagues of different generations. Something as simple as saying, "Could you please help me understand why you see it that way?" goes a whole lot further, as opposed to being a little bit more accusatory and saying, "I don't understand why you see it that way." One way is a request, while the other is definitely a judgment. And once those conversations take place, you can actually start to establish the trust. You can start to establish a true working relationship when you approach each other much more open in that way.
Yeah, and you brought up a really good point. I mean, the method of communication is really, really important. And you know, any leadership training or coaching, I think in my case, most of it is about communication and how you look at the problem in an interpersonal relationship type of focus. And once you get into the communication and help guide people through it, then they're actually surprised that it worked.
Yeah. Yeah.
But but mostly you see that toggling between Slack, text messaging, doing phone calls, using Zoom and Teams, Google Hangout, and email. Google Hangout, I don't think they're doing it so much anymore, but
No.
there are other places. Well, there are a lot of chats, and like we're on LinkedIn, and we, you know, you have the ability to either write it or be able to do an audio phone call with each other, or even a video, so that you talk to each other. So one of my friends did that the other day, and I was saying, "Oh, I didn't have to go on Zoom. That's so nice." So you know, it's fine, and you know, and then in person, then the younger generations below the X generation really don't like in-person communication. It makes them nervous. They, you know, they've been talking so much with this barrier, you know, the see-through barrier or hear-through barrier of social media and their phone book, their iPhones and Androids and so forth, and they just need to learn how to communicate one-on-one, and that's going to be very important. So we aren't doing ourselves any favors by assigning entire generations a preferred mode of communication. And in essence, the offices, the HR people, the trainers need to start training interpersonal communications so that people can see their different styles and the nuances and understand what is going on in that other person, because you can watch the body language and listen to their tone. And some people say the fact that older people are presumed not to know how to use technology is completely inaccurate, and that is true, because really I do more technology than my husband ever did. Sometimes I have to help him out, where in the beginning of technology I'm going, "Marty, I don't know what to do with this," but I have to help him out, which is amazing. So and you have to do that, you know. If you're not doing it, then you're leaving yourself out there all alone, and employers are using it to reduce costs, and to also be able to talk to somebody instantly. Yeah, I know a lot of people like to go down the hallway, and those people are going back to the office.
Exactly.
But, you know, I don't agree with them that you have to see a real live body, because if you can't communicate either in person, then you probably can't communicate, you know, online. So you need to work on both of them. And that's another thing, is virtual communication, and is a skill that most people need to develop. So
And part of what you're saying there, Betty, is people have different ways that they prefer to get their message across, that they prefer to communicate. You'll have some people, and it really doesn't matter what their age is. You'll have some people who prefer to talk on the phone. You'll have others who would prefer to text on a phone. You'll have some that prefer to use electronic types of communication, whether it's Slack or email or instant messaging. Everybody's got a different type of preference when it comes to communication. The problem is the bigger your team grows, the more different preferences you're more than likely going to have.
Sure.
And so people need to get together and decide, as a team, how are we going to communicate? As a company, how are we going to communicate? Because everybody needs to be on the same page.
Well, the other thing I was going to say to this, and I hate to jump in there, but as a team leader and as a manager of a group, that this diversity of communications out there, it would really be important for you to understand the importance of each type of communication and when it needs to be used and who uses it well, so that they can use it and you can guide them and then share it with the team. I mean, it's just not, like you said, all one thing.
Yeah, and if you create a group text and half the people don't ever bother to check their phone and check their text messages, how good of a communication tool is that going to be for you? So getting together and figuring out what the best thing is going to be when it comes to working with this team or working with this organization to communicate, because you have to have those lines of communication open. And when it comes to working across the different generations, it makes good business sense for the organization, because you've got these organizations that are spanning multiple generations. And that's going to be true for your customer base, because the workplace is generally a reflection of who it is that they're serving out there as customers. So when it comes to being able to communicate as a group, you need to be able to communicate with your customers in those types of situations too. And it's interesting because as you have younger people coming into the workplace, what they're challenging how the organization is communicating with the customers. For example, I know for years, one of the organizations I volunteered with, BPW, the Latrobe BPW, they would print up a newsletter every single month and mail it out to the members. And that was fine, until somebody pointed out, A, this is costing you a lot of money, and B, why don't you just email it? The problem is we had several members who were older members and didn't have email. So we had this time period where we had newsletters going out in multiple ways, but it met the needs of the constituents who were out there. It met the needs of the members, and that's what organizations have to focus on, is how are they meeting the needs of their customers? Can you use some type of hybrid option where you've got printed materials for the silent generation and for baby boomers, whereas you might have a digital materials for other generations. So that way you can meet the needs of not only your workforce, but also of your customer base.
Yeah, that's very true. In fact, in your hometown, when I lived in Pittsburgh, I got the Pittsburgh Business Times. And for the longest time, it was only paper. And my husband said, "What are we going to do with all this paper?" I said,
Yeah.
"I don't know."
Oh, yeah.
I said, "I guess we'll have to recycle it." But then came the digital. So you could have digital and print or just digital. And that really helped everybody who needed to see the Pittsburgh Business Times. So that's a really and all the news, I would imagine all the news that's fit to print around the United States and around the world. That's how it is. And I imagine digital, if people in other countries are, are far away, that digital is really important for them to have access, like in Australia or other places. So,
Definitely.
but one of the things that we become is very insular. And we are used to talking to our grandparents and elder relatives and friends, but do you do that regularly? Because you need to know what they're thinking. But the other thing is you need to also be inclusive by talking to all the generations, depending on what, and it doesn't matter what generation you are, and ask questions, listen to them. And if you don't embrace those operational, as they call it, generation circles, it will be difficult to really think at work and address it and apply it at work, because most companies are customer based. Yeah. So you need to understand what's going on in the marketplace. I think I have to say, and I'm not judging it at all, but the biggest thing that sort of fell flat was Budweiser recently. With their young person, and I think transgender maybe, but they were young and they looked, different. They had a very interesting style. And so, people couldn't deal with that. Right. And Budweiser is now losing a lot of sales, and we'll see what happens, right? So that sometimes that can really come back and hit you in the wallet.
Yeah. And you're right. You have to pay attention to who your true customer base is. Because if that's not who you're communicating to, and that's not who you're communicating with, you may lose them. Yeah.
So the pandemic really was a really big deal.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I mean, go ahead, Michelle, because it's really important that we share this.
It was huge. When everything shut down and people went home and started working from home, and kids left school and had to go to school from home, it created a lot of chaos and confusion, and you had work and life mixing all together, and so you had a whole lot going on at once. And the COVID pandemic and the lockdowns hit the different generations differently, because especially for when you looked at the silent generation and baby boomers, physically they were hit very differently than the younger generations were, because COVID itself really affected a lot of older people, and you had higher rates of death in older people who were getting COVID than you did in younger people who were getting COVID. So there are differences of how this affected it, but it also affected the workplace and the generations in the workplace very differently. Because now you've got people who are going home and are being asked to use these different types of technology to work, and some of them weren't real sure of how to do that. So, and then when you have Generation Z and the millennials who are leaving the workplace and going home, they hadn't necessarily developed the relationship skills, and they hadn't necessarily developed the work skills there at the workplace before they were sent home. And so during the pandemic, they kind of lost a lot of the skills that were needed to be successful at the workplace. And as far as educational skills, those have taken a loss too. We're seeing, now that we've come out of all the lockdowns, we're starting to see the kids who are graduating from high school and moving on to college, and graduating from college and moving into the workplace, excuse me, that they've lost some of that knowledge base because of what happened. And it's going to take a while for us to find out what the effects are going to be there on the workplace. But when it comes to generations that are now entering the workforce, employers, they need to, be a little bit more gentler and kinder with them, because for these people, it's been kind of a traumatic experience, going through what they had to go through.
And I tell you, if I had to go back into the office,
Uh-huh.
go get an office job, go back, and I was working for the federal government and county government, I think I don't know what I would do. It would be a culture shock for
Yeah.
me because I've been away from it for like 15 years or so. So, and I like working alone and
Mhm.
remotely. So, but when I looked at some things, I put my resume on Indeed just to see what's going on for executive leadership and career coaching. And it's interesting that there were a lot of remote jobs,
Mm.
and now they're getting less
Yeah.
and less.
Yep.
And so, people are really towing the hard line and saying, no, you need to be in the office, on campus, or whatever. And so I always talk to my clients and say that is a negotiating point, and there
Yeah.
are ways to negotiate that if you want your employer to be flexible, and the colleges are flexible. Sorry about that. Your colleges are flexible because they do have online
Yes.
education, so that's good. But one of the other ways that you learn is mentoring. And
Yes.
mentoring can be a two-way street. And when I was at the Department of Education, I tried to introduce that subject when we were talking about mentoring, have mentoring program, because a lot of the people there had PhDs and multiple master's degrees, and there were young people coming in, that were doing really good work and had experience.
Mhm.
And so you really, as a person in HR and in training and just consulting to the organization's leadership, you had to work with them to say, look, mentoring is a two-way street.
Mhm.
Each of you comes to the place with wisdom.
Yes.
Theirs may be street wisdom, yours may be corporate and organizational wisdom, and also being an expert in your field. But that doesn't mean that they aren't experts. They might bring a new perspective
Yeah.
that may put more life into something that you're doing. And I encourage the young generation to go find a mentor so that they could really learn how to work better in the organization. And I myself went out and found two mentors in another part of the agency that were senior executive service people, and that would be vice presidents in the corporate sector, because there was some negativity in management where I worked.
Mhm.
And I needed some outlet to say, am I doing it, or what's going on? How do I handle it? So having two-way mentorship is really important. And setting guidelines too, when you have that, is important too. So
Yeah. And like you said, it's a two-way street. The people think that the older ones are the ones that are just imparting all the knowledge, and the younger ones are the ones just soaking it up. But the reality is, it goes both ways.
right.
Younger people have a lot that they can share with older people, and both people end up learning from the experience.
I would imagine with the new recession coming up, and I'm sorry, I think there is going to be recession. How do I know? Well, let's see. I think I've been through 5 recessions.
Yeah.
And 2 were very big. They were in
You
the
know what to
70s,
look for.
and they were 2008 and 9, and now we're getting into maybe a minor recession if things go well. But again, I talk to my clients, say, don't let the recession stop you. The potential of recession, or if you're thinking that you're feeling recessional, don't let it stop you, because there's a hidden job market. There are hidden opportunities for you to be able to lead. And it's what you do with that opportunity, or how you go out and find it, is the important thing. Because I really, all my jobs were referral, except
Mhm.
for a couple. So it's in who you know also.
Yeah.
Again, that social group, you need to network and everything like that.
Yeah, and it's important to network with people outside of your own generation. You need to expand your network, not just in industries and in job types, but also in age groups, because they're going to be able to help you with your career just as much as somebody who's actually uh, right around in your generation and in your industry. You need to expand and take advantage of all the people who are out there who can help you.
And even we haven't really talked about the other people, the people who are freelancing,
Yeah.
or the people like you and I that have our own business. But we rely on looking for the opportunities. And sometimes we get so heavy into marketing. I don't know about you, but it wore me out last year. I got so overwhelmed that I almost got sick. And so I'm going back to the, the age old true, asking for referrals,
Yep.
networking with people, friends and their friends. And also, I'm thinking about sending out a pamphlet.
There you go.
The good old digital and,
Yep.
paper pamphlet, because that's something that people aren't even thinking about. And so, I also, the other thing I say, look, they're asking for a cover letter and a resume
Mhm.
online. That's fine. But then send it to them in the office as a cover up, because it may not get to them
Right.
digitally. Something
Oh
may
yeah.
happen. You don't
Yeah.
know. And,
Uh,
and that goes with everything, marketing and everything.
yeah. When it comes to you've got a lot of AI out there that will go through the cover letters, it'll go through the resumes, and if you don't have the keywords there, you're right, it doesn't make it to that person.
Yeah.
And so if you literally mail them a copy, a hard copy of it, you have a better shot of it getting to them. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and you brought up a good point. Keywords, right? So the postings are keywords, and you look at your resume and your cover letter and use the keywords,
Mhm.
but you describe your experience. But going back to also people who are working in customer related services, the other thing is being able to understand why they're there. What's the purpose? In our case, what's the pain and what's the gain?
Yeah.
But what do they absolutely need to succeed? And if you're in a service industry, like even the restaurant industry and the retail, you have to talk to customers that come in to find out what it is they need, maybe how they're feeling. Ask them a question like, well, it looks like you've had a really tough day. And if they say no, they say, well, then I misread you.
Yeah.
So really, it's important to have different types of communication and be really a clear communicator and feel confident in different forms of communication. And communication is not going away, no
No.
matter how many AIs we have. And
Yeah.
if they do, then they've taken over the world, right? So we just, I'm not against AI, don't get me wrong. I'll probably dip my toe into it, foot probably, but I still rely on the human element. We have the experience and we think, and we can teach others and mentor others to also develop those competencies and be confident.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've covered a lot today.
Yeah.
Talking about the different generations there in the workplace, some of the challenges that they're facing with communication styles. And I think uh, part of what we need to look into later on down the road may be how what we were just talking about with AI and how that's starting to creep in, maybe how the different generations are approaching it too, because I suspect some generations are going to be more skeptical of using AI than others. And so maybe we need to take a look at AI and what it's doing there in the workplace.
Well, I think the other thing too is how it's being used effectively and ethically.
Mm-hmm.
Word, yay. And how it's being misused.
Yeah.
Because as a former teacher and in college as well as in middle school, I worry about the kids being able to use AI to do their papers. But I have the information, so they may not be very happy if they miswrite
Right.
something about, like, mine was US history, right? I know what happened in US history, and they're going to suffer for it if they don't apply what they learned or what they can learn and not use AI. So there are ways to use AI, and maybe we can bring that up too, that
Yep.
are good ways.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and we will see you next time.
See you
Bye,
next time.
everyone.
Bye.